This is the last Sunday of Advent, one of my favorite Sundays of the year because our preparations are almost over. Soon we celebrate that Christ has come, love has come, a light in the darkness. Over the next few days, we'll tell the story again, at home around nativity sets, at church with readings and carols, on the screen with favorite movies like Charlie Brown Christmas or the claymation Little Drummer Boy. It's an amazing story. There are so few stories that we long to hear every year, but it is so ordinary that it's told every day. A pregnant woman, a nervous spouse, great anxiety when you realize that you know diddly squat about being a parent. But then there's a soft cry, a first breath drawn in, and whispered words. It's all right, little one. It's all right now. A child is born. Remarkable and remarkably ordinary. It's a story so common, it has been told in various circles by each one of you. While you might not ever think about it, when you were born, those who loved you told the story. They might have told of how you came early, or came late, or came right on time, how it was a hard labor or easy labor, or you came way too fast, you hadn't even gotten to the hospital room yet. You had a full head of hair, or no hair, or in my case, your head was too big for any hats to fit in that the hospital had to fit you. I was like a watermelon on a toothpick. How you looked at your parents and how you were a miracle. When babies are born, we have to tell the story. We do the same this time of year, especially this Sunday and in a couple nights. The story of a child born of woman like every other child, and yet a child born of God as was no other child. There were angels there, messengers sent to reveal the good news. They sang at the top of their halos. There were unexpected visits, not from aunts and uncles and Joseph's co-workers, but from complete strangers. Shepherds came singing angel songs. Magi from faraway lands came bringing gifts that you would only give a king. You would think that such a miraculous child would be celebrated far and wide, but honestly, he found no welcome here. He slept as much as babies sleep in a manger. He was passed by many, feared by a few, but mostly he was ignored. We try to tell the story every year with words and songs and plays and puppets, but all of our attempts to explain it fall flat, not because they are wrong, but because they are too small. But this Sunday, this is the Sunday that calls into question our skepticism, because this Sunday, when we light the candle of representing love, it invites us to trust the love that makes us human has come down. And love can't wait. But this story raises questions, at least at some point in our lives. How could this be possible? Because let's be real, it sounds like a fairy tale. We heard in the puppet songs, a fairy tale love. I was chastised by Emma Taylor a few minutes ago because they took a quiz in Sunday school where they had to answer all these questions about the Christmas story. And most of the answers were, we don't know for sure. But her point was, what we're taught in Sunday school, there were 3 wise men. Never actually says that. There was a donkey. Never actually says that. So we have this story we get in our minds and we start digging deeper. Well, maybe that part wasn't true or it didn't actually say. We start to ask other questions. Well, how could this happen? Would this happen? It sounds too much like a fairy tale. The best stories usually do, though. But the challenge for us is we live on this side of the Enlightenment, which taught us that science would answer almost everything, that human reason would name all truth. It took us a while to recognize that such claims were just another way of saying the human brain is God. So we wondered, how could this story be true? It doesn't make any sense that God would take on flesh. How do you explain it? It's a good question to grapple with. And doing so may bring you to other questions, or it may just leave you wrapped in skepticism. But if you live there long enough to realize that skepticism just leaves you empty, then pack up your questions and bring them once again to the story, because you want something more out of the story and out of life. We were talking in confirmation class this morning about communion, and we got into all the different understandings of communion from the different traditions and trying to explain it with philosophy and Aristotle and science. And we kind of said, it's interesting to explore all of that. But ultimately, look at the story in the Bible, from the Passover to the Last Supper to the road to Emmaus, Peter breaking bread with the Gentiles. Sometimes the story's so big, your explanations will always be too small. It's like poetry. If you try to parse out poetry too much and squeeze every bit of meaning out of it, you've basically killed the poem. Sometimes stories can present a truth that are too big for explanations. Have you ever found that to be true? Have you ever lived that to be true? That sometime in your life, some story you tell over and over again, you can't ever explain it. It just happened, and you let the story speak for itself. But you're still invited to bring your questions, and if you do, I hope you'll bring the biggest question of all. Not how all of this happened, but why. Why did God choose this? Why would the creator of the universe, who lives beyond time and place, choose to be a human being? Why would God's Spirit choose to experience fatigue and battle the flu, to know loneliness and what it is to have a broken heart, to experience traffic jams at the Giant Center when the Jonas Brothers are here? Why would you want to do this? Paul says this because God is humble. He says Christ humbled himself. He emptied himself, being born in human likeness. Now, humility is not usually the first adjective we might choose to describe God. We think of powerful and mighty, omnipotent, and those things. But it's one that Paul insists is essential. Christ humbled himself to become like you and me. Have you ever humbled yourself? Often it's not a fun experience. At a previous church, we did what we called a Faith in Action Sunday, where instead of having worship in the sanctuary, we took worship out of the building by serving our neighbors. One group went to a local mission we supported to do some work around the grounds in their houses, and Chris and I were taken to a house they own and given a bucket of spackle and a spreader thingy. I think it's called a spreader thingy. And it was pointed to a chunk of wall near the ceiling, and we're told to fix it. Then the guy left. I am not a contractor. Chris and I looked at each other. We had a general idea what to do, so we thought. But then questions started piling up. Now, do we sand the area down first? Do we peel off more of these loose bits? Do we just slop the spackle on and smooth it out? Now, the smart thing to do would have been to try to track this guy down and get more information. But how often in life do we choose the smart thing? So we start with trying to put some spackle on, and we start tearing away the more loose pieces, and before long, the messed up part was twice as big as before, and the wall looked like a very bad attempt at icing an incredibly lumpy cake. I told Chris, I think we failed. I had to go and find Jim, the guy who gave us the job. Jim, I think we failed you. Well, let me come and look, he said. Now, of course, then everyone else wants to come and look, too. You know when you are put in a position to declare to all around you that you don't know what you are doing, that you are not skilled, that you can't compete, you are not enough? It can be humiliating. And I think that's what we too often think of humility. We connect it with humiliating. And we think to be humble, we have to humiliate ourselves. But that's not what Paul is saying. Sometimes we think humility is thinking less of ourselves. But that's not the case at all. Christ's humility results not from how he sees himself, but from how he sees you. It's like that old Seinfeld episode with Costanza, and he has the whole, it's not me, it's you thing. And you're like, don't pull that on me, it's you. Well, for God, it's really not about God, it's about you. The humbling is because how God sees you. When I was younger, I was pretty good at soccer. My teams won championships, and I was usually a pretty key component to those victories, whether I was playing striker or sweeper. But one day, my dad's friend Doug, who was a big-time soccer coach, came over for dinner and brought a friend of his who had played for the U.S. national team. And I asked him about soccer, what it was like to play against Pele, listen to stories. Then my dad had the nerve to say, you know, Steven's a pretty good soccer player too. And I thought, oh, Dad, just stop. But he's a dad, so he did not. And he continued, you know, he scored 2 goals in last week's game. And I said, Dad, just stop. He is not impressed with ASO soccer. Although I was the leading goal scorer in the league, but it's not like he is going to want to go in the backyard and watch me kick the ball. Just stop talking, Dad. See, here's the funny thing, though. Had anyone else been at that table, I would have been happy to regale them with all my soccer accomplishments. I could have acted out plays, but I didn't want to that night because I was humbled. I was humbled not because I felt inadequate or unimportant or I felt I wasn't any good at soccer. I was humbled because I saw something greater in him. Humility does not result from how we see ourselves, but rather how we see others. Now, this text of Paul may not seem like the greatest fourth Sunday of Advent text, the greatest text for the Sunday in which we light the candle of love, but it proclaims that Christ was born because Christ sees beauty, value, and worth in you. He sees a greatness in you. Christ loves you. That's not only why he came, there's no way he could stay away. Love can't wait. Christ couldn't wait to be with you, to teach you, transform you, save you, to show you how the great love of God is for each and every one of us. I think that's a message we all need to hear over and over again. Love came down because of you. You are worth that much. Mighty lays his glory by. To lead the throne of heaven, come here. Take on all it means to be human because of you. That's how God sees us, as an object of God's reckless love, a love that can't sit idly by, that can't bear to see us hurt, a love that can't wait. What is harder to explain is why it's so difficult for us to see the same in ourselves and one another. The world seems to celebrate blustering and meanness and hatred, but that's not what God sees. God sees a world worthy of unconditional love. Preaching professor Tom Long once told a story about a man he saw carrying his wife across the threshold. Tom was driving by when he glimpsed this homecoming and thought maybe it's from a wedding. At first glance, it looks like they were taking that first cheerful step into a new life together. The man was happily carrying his wife across the threshold. But the traffic stopped and Tom had a longer look. They were both graying, much older than what he first thought. And then Tom saw the wheelchair from which clearly the man had just lifted her. This wasn't the first easy step across the threshold. It was perhaps the 1,000th hard step. Who knows what others might see in this wheelchair-bound woman if they saw her at all. But no doubt she was carried by the one who still knew she was beautiful and worthy of love and so much more. He could do nothing else. Christ humbled himself because of what he sees in you. And because of that, he just couldn't stay away. Love can't wait. Can you, for your child, your spouse, your parent, your best friend, can you stay away? God couldn't, and God can't. Love can't wait. This is the story. This is the time where all our attempts to explain it fall flat, not because they are wrong, but because they are too small. It's also a time that calls into question our skepticism, because this story invites us to trust that love that makes us human has come down. That indeed, sometimes the world does behave like a fairy tale. because of what Christ sees in us. He could not help but come. It's a fairy tale kind of love, but one that is eternally true. The best stories always are, and they can't wait. So don't wait to tell the story of love in your own life to those you love, to the neighbors you have, to the strangers you don't know. Because Christ sees in them something special and important enough to come here in the form of a baby, to live and to love and to hurt and to suffer and to rise all for you, the person next to you and across from you and down the street and across the ocean. Each person is someone God says, you are worthy enough of me to come down. I need to come down. I can't stay away from you. I need you to know how much I love you. That's what the Bible is. The Bible is one love story of how God loves us. So don't wait to read it. Don't wait to believe it. You may not understand all of it. There might be a lot of questions. Believe me, I have a lot of questions. But sometimes we can question something so much it loses its power and its beauty. Because some things are just worth believing in. That there is love, powerful love, and it can't wait. It can never wait. So don't wait. Let us pray together. Almighty God, thank you for your love that has come down, a light in the darkness, a love that reminds us how precious we are in your sight. Lord, thank you for being a God who is with us and for us. You can't wait to share with us your love. Help us to share your love, to practice your justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with you, but most of all, help us to love, to live in love, to share in love, to speak in love, and to act in love. Help us not to wait anymore, to be love to the world. Amen.